Good morning and welcome back to the show. We're here with Mr. Charlie Horton, former MLS Championship League, League One, EFL, and USL goalie and US alum class of 2013. How are you, Mr. Horton?
Well, that's quite an intro. But nice to meet you guys, and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, so Mr. Horton, we did a little research on you, and one thing that stood out was that you were born in London. So what was it like growing up overseas, and any fun childhood stories from your time over there?
Uh, yeah, so I was born over in the UK. You can call me Charlie.
Okay.
I was I grew up. I was born in London. My father was actually English. My mom was American. Um, and that's actually where, sort of my love for soccer, of course, over there, football sort of started. But I had two older half brothers, and we had a trampoline, and they would turn the trampoline was sort of a rectangle, and they would turn the rectangle on its side, and they would sort of shoot balls at the rectangle, the trampoline, and one day sort of encouraged me to go stand in front of it to try and stop them, and that's sort of what turned me into a goalkeeper. And of course, the worst part about that was if they managed to get one past, you'd actually hit the trampoline and then came back and hit you in the back of the head. So, um, you try to stop that from happening.
Um, how did you end up not only kind of just coming to the US, right, but also US for school?
Yeah, good question. So my mom, as I mentioned, was American. My parents ended up getting divorced, and when they got divorced, my mom sort of wanted to return back to an area that was close to her parents. Her parents were in Western New York, near sort of Erie, Pennsylvania. And so Cleveland was the sort of largest, city nearby where she could practice law. She was a lawyer. And I was really fortunate. I ended up coming to US. I joined in the third grade. And then my sister, Rachel, went to Halfway Brown.
Do you think US played a big role in your development as an athlete, or did you kind of get that development outside of US?
Uh, that's a good question. I think athletically, US uh, set me up for success, and I mean that in that, like, there was every sort of opportunity for me to go and pursue what it was that I wanted to pursue, and US was sort of willing to facilitate and support me and my family in sort of whatever way, um, frankly, we thought would help me be successful. And that took a lot of different turns at different stages. At some stages, that was sort of me going down to Florida to practice and train for 6 months. And at other stages, it was, playing for the varsity soccer team. So I would say they never stood in my way is probably how I would say it. Now, on a personal level, as a human being, I give a tremendous amount of credit to university school for sort of turning me into and making me the person that I am today.
When you first got into soccer, right, how did playing soccer here compare to what you were used to, and what was the competition different? Did US soccer kind of give you the kind of experience you were hoping for?
I don't know how it works now. Back then, coming from England, obviously you start playing soccer at a very early age. So when I came to the US, I was sort of ahead of the curve, I would say. And then I probably honestly just regressed a little bit. That was no fault of university school. It was just like, in the UK, all of their best athletes go and play soccer from a very early age. As you guys are well aware, at US, but in the US more generally, we sort of split all of our best athletes across 5 or 6 sports. And some of those athletes will actually do multiple sports. And so I think you sort of dilute the talent pool a little bit, but that comes with benefits, which we can talk about. Um, but the soccer team itself at US was fantastic. There was sort of it was a club team. It was called the Development Academy. Again, it's probably called something else now. This is over 10, 15 years ago. But I actually would go to play on a travel team when it wasn't soccer season at US. and then would come back to US. Eventually that travel team ended up taking over. And so my senior year, I actually wasn't able to play for university school, which was, in hindsight, like one of the biggest bummers of my high school, athletic experience. Because personally, I found like there was no better feeling than like playing a game on a Monday or Tuesday night, coming in the next day and having a bunch of your buddies that had been at the game and going crazy. And those are some of my like core favorite memories from US.
Besides soccer, were there any other culture shocks that when you moved from England to the US, was there anything that kind of caught you off guard?
Um, I don't know about culture shocks. I mean, I showed up as sort of the third grade kid with a thick British accent, and as you can tell, that's completely disappeared. Much to my wife's dismay. But it was pretty seamless, honestly. And like I said, university school, just in general, I really can't speak more highly of.
At a school that's so academically focused, how did you manage to play soccer at such a high level? And were there moments where it just felt like too much sometimes?
It's a good question. Um, I think university school does a tremendous job setting you up for what you're going to face in the real world, candidly. And yes, I think university school did sort of set me up to compete and play soccer at the highest level. I think a lot of that was sort of done through them creating sort of the person that I became. And a lot of that is sort of like, to your question, managing the stressors of having to perform and complete your academics at a very high level, but then also be expected to go out on the soccer field after a long day of school and practice or play and compete. And in reality, when you get to the real world and you have your first internship and your first job, it's sort of funny, but like the same sort of stresses and demands on your time exist. And frankly, because you've been at a school where you've sort of had to train and practice and be a part of a team and sort of practice all of these skills, I think it ends up serving you really, really well. Not to mention you get a world-class education and, hopefully go to a great school that you're excited about.
So after US for you, you went to play professional soccer, and you passed up an opportunity to play at UNC, who was recently coming off a national championship at the time. Why did you make that decision?
It's a good question. Sometimes I ask myself that. No, I think, for me, I remember a conversation I had with my mom, and it was, I had always had this dream of being a professional athlete and being a professional goalkeeper. And, UNC, as you said, sort of were top program. I actually don't know how they've done since, but national champions when I signed an NLI there, was super excited, but ultimately had a contract put in front of me. And it was like, okay, there are truly so many things that could go wrong to where you won't be able to reach that goal. You won't be able to be a professional soccer player, whether that's through injury or just bad luck. To where I said, like, look, I want to back myself. I want to go and try this. I want to go and experience, life abroad as an athlete and see what that's like. And I made a promise to my mom that I'd go back to school. And so I did it. And I don't regret it. I joked at the beginning, but there's always like the what if analysis of what life would have been like in Chapel Hill, which, don't get me wrong, great school, have nothing but good things to say about, the team and the coach. And when I left the school and went overseas, anytime I was sort of like in the news or made the national team, anything like that, it was actually, the UNC head coach who I'd turned down and called a week before my freshman year was supposed to begin, that would send me an email and say, hey, Charlie, congratulations, still following your career, really excited for you, et cetera, which, speaks to the caliber human being that Carlos, the head coach, was, the institution of UNC, but also just, is part of why I have nothing but good things to say about him and that program.
I feel like most high school players won't even know how to get noticed by these international soccer clubs or other teams. How did that process kind of really work?
Yeah, it's anyone that asks me this, I say I got lucky, which is true. It wasn't at US. So I mentioned this development academy team that I played for, and there was a showcase in I want to say it was in Texas, but I could be wrong. And this was, my junior or senior year when I was sort of on my way to go to UNC. And we were playing a team. And honestly, my senior year, the team was called the International Soccer Academy. I'm almost certain the International Soccer Club still exists in Cleveland. Um, but I was playing for them, and I played in a game. I we weren't very good, and I was very busy. And 30 minutes into the game, I'd probably made 3 or 4 saves I wasn't supposed to. I'd saved a penalty kick, and then the referee said someone encroached, which basically means, one of our outfield players ran in on the kick before the guy took it when I saved it. So he made them redo the penalty kick. I'd saved it again. And then like I said, in the 30th minute, I got a red card, and I got a red card because I came out and took out the striker that had broken through, which was pretty devastating. And I'll never forget, the referee came up to me and said, "Charlie, I'm sorry, I have to send you off for this because I'm enjoying watching you play." And so I was sent off. I went to the bench, took off my gloves, obviously pretty upset. That means you're suspended for 2 games or 3 games after that. And a scout out of nowhere came up to me and was basically like, "Hey, you're wasting your time going to play at UNC. You should go abroad." And that started sort of a domino, long story, but ended up, going on trial just to see sort of what it would be like. And this was sort of a couple weeks before my freshman year. Ended up going well, and was offered a contract. But it really was lucky. It was the right game, the right, good game, the right team we were playing against, and the right person, literally walking by the field I was playing on at the right time.
That's cool. Well, I've been around some high level athletics, but I can't imagine making that kind of decision you did at just 18. Playing professionally overseas is a huge jump. So who helped guide you through that process?
Yeah, it's another good question. I really had a village of amazing people and an amazing support system around me. And those were people, it really started with like John Patasek at University School. And then, even people like Mr. De La Mata, who at least back then was still coaching, one of the JV teams, but he and I were super close from that connection to the sport. And then it sort of grew from there. And I had, folks that I'd met along the way that were either sort of professional players in their own right, or professional coaches, and had coached or played at the highest level. But I really had just a tremendous support system. That was really, in many ways, I think the work of my mom, who I have a lot to thank for, that I could just sort of like lean on and ask for guidance and experience, because ultimately you're exactly right. I mean, you go from being a 17, 18-year-old, a big fish in a small pond, to walking into a locker room where it's like you need to figure out how you're going to communicate with the 34-year-old guy that's at the end of his career and going home to like a wife and 4 kids at the end of the day, and I'm 18 with very different things on my mind. So it was crazy. I mean, and one of the coolest things that frankly I would impart on anyone that I talk to just about professional athletics and school and the decision to forego college at that point. Man, had I gone to UNC, I would have had no understanding or appreciation for the education that I was getting, even when I was in your shoes at US. And when you go into a professional locker room where truly, like, these guys, most of them, this is like their way out. This is the only thing they can do to sort of put food on the table. And candidly, by their own admission, like, can't really string a sentence together. Man, you get an appreciation very quickly for education and what it is that, an institution like University School, or frankly, all the other great schools in Cleveland, provide to you guys and me and folks coming through their corridors.
As a goalkeeper, leadership is just a huge part of the position. How did you kind of develop your leadership skills, and what advice would you give to young athletes about leading from their own position?
Yeah. Another good question. I think, look, the reality that I'm even still confronting now as a young professional is like no one has ever finished evolving and adapting and growing as a leader. And anyone I think that thinks, they have should take a real firm look in the mirror because I think leadership is so important, but really changes depending on your environment and frankly who you're standing across from, who you're communicating with. When I was playing, look, I was like very loud. I was trying to organize people. I tried to be commanding of my 18-yard box, which is, the area where a goalkeeper is sort of in charge and can use their hands. Like those were sort of all the things that I sort of aspired to be. Um, but there are certain players and certain games and certain coaches that you honestly just have to communicate with very differently. Um, and that sort of fine tuning is something I still work on today. It's certainly not ever a finished product.
Yeah, that's great. So after your soccer career, you fulfilled your promise to your mom and went to George Washington, and then completely switched things up by joining the rowing team. So how
That,
did that happen?
that is correct. So I did go back to school. I had the um, last of several concussions and sat across from a doctor, and he was basically, look, you're okay. If you keep sort of rolling the dice, you're going to start to flirt with a line where like you probably don't want to do that. And so I said, okay, say no more. And frankly, there'd always been a part of me that wanted to convince people there was more to me than just sort of being a soccer player. Um, I went to GW. I was walking around campus and I had at the time, the Cleveland Indians baseball cap on. And uh, one of these guys walked up to me, sort of like a big guy, and goes, you're a baseball player. And I was like, no, and I chuckled and I sort of said, I used to play a little bit of soccer and really didn't let on to anything. And he's like, oh, well, you're built like a rower. You should come out for the rowing team. And it turns out this guy, Jack St. Clair was his name, was sort of like a novice that he wasn't a novice. I was a novice, but he actually was an athlete on the team. He turned into a manager because he ended up getting hurt. But he encouraged me to come to this basically like an open tryout. And I had sort of been sitting back. I was starting school at 23 years old. I was like, I'm going to struggle to make friends. I don't know what my circle's going to be. I was sort of in a bit of a precarious position. And man, like all of a sudden I had this great, input and avenue into, excuse me, a bunch of guys that work really, really hard. And, it was a bit odd because, and it's probably different now, but in Cleveland, when I grew up, like the rowing kids were the weird kids. And so, or at least like you didn't have very many rowers coming through US. But man, did I find just some awesome human beings. I absolutely loved my time there. Um, and it helped me through, a challenging period of transition. My mom passed away. And so the rowing team really became like a second family in many ways.
So now you're in private equity. Before that, I believe you went into investment banking. How do
Yep.
you think, playing high level athletics, a lot of people that go into those careers, they go, straight top school and then into investment banking, private equity. But you had a different path by going into high level athletics. So how do you think that kind of propelled you into a career in the finance world?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, I think the nice thing about being an athlete is you learn a bunch of these skills that the corporate world is really, really interested in hiring. And that's things like being on a team, metabolizing failure, um, understanding what it means to work for something, with uncertain outcomes at the end. I mean, there are just so many lessons that you get by being a part of really playing a sport, but especially a team sport that, these large, institutions like to hire for. And so, that's one thing that's really important. And then, back to sort of some of the values at US, actually being able to articulate them and like, build connections with people uh, um, really have people buy into your success just as a human, as an individual. Those all become super important. And then, yeah, like you said, I sort of was fortunate to find finance and sort of have people push me on, the path in terms of, getting your foot in the door early enough and teaching yourself what you need to know to sort of have success with these interviews and placing various places. But I ended up at Morgan Stanley. I spent 2 years there in their M&A department, and that's sort of like a tried and true path to go into investing, which is where I am now. And the fund I work for, Hellman and Friedman, like we hire a bunch of athletes too. Like it's sort of all of these skills are highly sought after, and it continues to serve me well.
Do you still kind of stay connected to the soccer world in any way, whether it's coaching, mentoring, refereeing, or just playing for fun?
Uh, I play very rarely. My wife, her brother had a like a beer league team here in New York, and they were playing. This is not like maybe a year ago, and they were playing like a Tuesday night in some game, and I guess they needed a goalkeeper, or long story short, I got roped into going and playing, and we ended up winning 2-0, and it was honestly so fun. I need to go back and start playing more. But it got to the point where my wife was actually cheering against me. So, uh, but it was fun. So I do still play. And then, look, I keep in touch with a lot of my coaches. I got married this summer. The, sorry, the, the officiant of my wedding was actually my goalkeeping coach at Leeds United. Um, and like he and I still stay, close and connected. He was at Manchester United recently, and he would have Heidi and I come in and go to games, and so like I still am connected to that world and in touch with the people that I really care about and have built relationships with. Um, but I'm also removed from the game in many ways. I really only follow the people that I know personally.
We like to ask all of our guests the same question that constantly stays in our own minds about what is your why? Like, what's that driving force behind everything you've done and wanted to accomplish from playing pro soccer to where you are now?
Yeah. Um, for the longest time, and I think in many ways it still is, it has been my family and my mom. And obviously now that she's gone, it sort of has just transitioned into like, okay, well, if she was here, like I would want to be making her proud. Um, but that's it. I mean, there are, I think if I take that now a step further, why I feel it's important to like make those people proud is, and it goes now just to beyond just my mom is, people invest a tremendous amount in us as young men, as boys at university school, but then sort of growing up and into young men. And man, like I get a tremendous amount of purpose and power from trying to sort of reward and pay back the faith, trust, and energy that people have poured into me just because that they took a bet or they believed in me, or frankly that they just cared to do so. And so I take a tremendous amount of purpose and responsibility from that.
You've had such a full life so far. You've played high level sports, you're in finance now at a high level. Where do you see yourself going after this?
It's a good question. I don't know. I did 2 years at Morgan Stanley. I'm in a 2-year program here at Hellman and Friedman. I've started to sort of think about what might be next, and I'm honestly not sure. Um, I like what I'm doing. I find the work that I do interesting. We basically get to look at and speak to companies and management teams and basically take bets on whether we like them or not. And so I think something in a similar sort of vein, but I'm not sure. It's a good question, and I sort of ask myself that, um, and I'm always sort of thinking about and looking for what might be next.
You kind of mentioned that you keep up with some of the people that you met on your journey through soccer. Do you keep up with some of your friends still here from US? And have you seen this connection that you've kind of like taken with you from US?
Yeah, totally. So my best friend, probably, he was the captain of the soccer team at US, Jude Jingo, who I doubt you guys have ever heard of, but he was the captain. He was my best friend. He was at my wedding. He and I still keep in touch. He lives in New York. He has actually started a couple companies. I think he's on his this is technically maybe his second one, although he might call it the first one, morphed into the next one. Who you guys should actually definitely speak to. He started a caffeinated energy bite company. Um, but he and I keep in close touch. Evan Harris is another good friend that I keep in touch with. Johnny McGinnis, who was a year ahead of me, I keep in touch. Like, there's just such an interconnected, web, and the people that you're really close to at US become, lifelong friends. What's amazing is, for me especially, like, I actually went so far out of their lives. We went through completely different things. I was sort of overseas playing soccer while they were already finishing college. But like, you still stay connected to all these people, and I'll see Johnny and go skiing. I'll see Brooks in San Francisco and grab a coffee. Those phone numbers don't go away. So, I missed my first reunion, and I was bummed, because I think, you really have quite a powerful and amazing brotherhood at that school. And I think that in many ways, you'll find that you have friends that you can not see for years at a time, but then come back together and pick up right where you left off. And I imagine that it would be that way for the majority of folks in my class if I, was able to actually make it to a reunion.
Yeah. Do you have any like funny stories or just favorite stories from your time at US?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I can share them all. uh, yeah, the one that sticks out in my mind, which I'm going to spare some details just for the, anonymity of the situation. There was a senior prank, my senior year, and I had left school early to go and play soccer, believe it or not, overseas. And before my flight, I came onto campus. I used to live right next door, and came on with two buddies, and we sort of set the stage for this senior prank. And maybe some of the teachers that were there would remember it, but we did it, and I just remember I was so excited, but because I was leaving the next day, I never actually got to like see the prank in action. And long story short, we tied a bunch of canoes together and left them out on the middle of Lake Kilroy with some. I'm just gonna leave it at that. And I never got to see it. I never got to see the reaction. All I got were like my buddies that did it with me texting me, being like, "This is fantastic. This is going off. Like, it's great." And then it wasn't until like 6 months or a year later when I saw. I don't know if it was Stephen Murray, whoever the headmaster was back then, or maybe it was William Daltrey, who I think's now left. But they were doing a video recording for like a piece of publicity for the school. And I guess they'd done it the same day that we put this prank out in the middle of the lake, and you could see it in the background. And it was just like, it still is like one of my favorite memories. But no, I mean, I have so many great memories from that school. There are so many tremendous teachers. And there are people that I, now have left. They're not there anymore. But, when I graduated, it was, you had professors and teachers like Dr. Yadid, who you guys may or may not have heard of, but he was a language teacher, was at the school for, gosh, 45 years, like a legend. All right. Like, this guy truly like has like still is teaching me, and I'm learning from Ron Grant, who was the athletic director at University School for another, 40 plus years. Pat Aliazzi, who I think has recently left. Alan Cate, I think he still might teach there. Like there are just so many incredible teachers that truly, like you guys, like we and I and you guys are so lucky to have and learn from, and you know, I hope they also realize the tremendous sort of profound impact they have on just sort of not just what they're teaching, but how they sort of set you out into the world. And I mean, US is a really special place.
If you could give one or a couple pieces of advice to current US students who want to play at a high level like you did, what would it be?
Yeah. The first one would be don't let anyone tell you you can't. For everyone that told me like you're great and you're gonna be, you're gonna be able to play at the next level, there were 10 that said no way. So you need a way to, use that as fuel. And then the other thing is just like enjoy the journey. Like I look back on it now, and like there were so many stressors and things in my life, and I'm so sort of far removed from being a professional athlete. I miss it. You know, even when you're in school, but the practice, the grind, it'll be over before you know it. So enjoy that journey and never give up.
That's great. Well, I think this might be one of our last questions here. But I'm kind of going through that process of I play baseball, but hopefully playing at the next level in college. Do you have any advice recruiting wise of like how to put yourself out there and kind of present yourself to the colleges?
Yeah, you'd be, this is a good piece of advice, whether you want to be an athlete or frankly a finance professional. Like you'd be surprised how far personal relationships and connections go. And like at the end of the day, you will need to be a good enough pitcher or first baseman or whatever it is that you're, excellent at. Like that sort of has to stand on its own. But actually, like the way in which you approach, what you do and the relationships that you make and foster can really actually open the door for you and allow you to sort of step through it in a meaningful way. So I would encourage you to just reach out to these coaches, find out where they're going to be. A lot of times, they're used to people reaching out to them and asking them for something. Like I would actually, rather than ask for something, like try and learn from them. Ask them what they're doing, where they're finding talent, who, how you can set yourself apart, rather than just going and saying, "Hey, I want to play baseball for you." All of a sudden, that opens up a dialogue and a level of maturity for you guys, where like people are gonna, want to share, what it is that they know because they've spent decades, perfecting and crafting it, but also just like, maybe come at it from a different angle that they might not be expecting.
Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Well, Charlie, it has been a great time having you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences and everything. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Late Start Show, and we hope you join us next Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, guys. Go US.
Yeah.
Go US.